Hi, and welcome to my review of Dark Shadows, starring Johnny Depp and directed by Tim Burton. Dark Dark Shadows is the now eighth collaboration with Johnny Depp and Tim Burton, and they began on Edward Scissorhands back in 1992, and now they've made 8 films together. And I always look forward to their collaborations because, if anything, you're gonna get a movie that is very well made, and you're gonna get a movie from a director that really cares about the visuals and cares about how a film looks and just the overall tone and emotional resonance that a film has. He That's Tim Burton's strength, is just the visuals and being able to just immerse the audience, the viewer, into his world. Really, Tim Burton is his own genre, in my opinion. There's no other director like him because he is able to just capture your imagination with what he puts on screen, and just you're lost in it. It's that world. Uh, he's done this countless times in all of his movies. With the exception of a few, I feel like he's really succeeded relatively well at this. And with Johnny Depp, he's found an actor who is willing to go along with him in his vision every single time. Now, this movie is based off of the 1967 Dark Shadows ABC soap opera. Ran for 4 years, 67 to 71, and that starred Jonathan Frid as Barnabas Collins. He came on later on in the show. So I've watched a few of the show's episodes. I'm not an expert in Dark Shadows, but I've watched quite a bit of the episodes, and I knew the backstory going into the movie. So I guess I had some knowledge going in about what this was going to be about, but I haven't watched the full show. I haven't watched like any of the last 3 years of the show. I've only watched like the first year. So really, I didn't have that much knowledge, but just enough. So from that standpoint, but I'm not going to review this based on the show. I'm just going to review this movie based on how I felt the movie did, not comparing it to the TV show. The film opens really great, actually. The first 15 or 20 minutes of the movie are basically just a prologue to introduce us to Barnabas' story, how he became a vampire, and that's crucial for later on because he was cursed to be a vampire by this woman named Angelique, and she cursed him back in late 18th century, and he became a vampire. And she's a witch pretty much. And when he wakes up almost 200 years later, she's still there in a different form, but she's still there. And a lot of this movie, it goes from being dark to humorous, dark to humorous. This is something that Tim Burton does in a lot of his movies. For example, Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands, pretty much every movie. Sleepy Hollow has some humor in it as well, that not as much. A lot of his movies have this where he likes the macabre, he likes just situational humor, and this film has a lot of that. A lot of the humor also is driven by the interactions between Barnabas, who is essentially a person from the late 18th century who is now woken up in 1972 and interacting with the world around him. For example, he doesn't understand what a road is. He doesn't understand what a lava lamp is. He thinks it's like blood. He doesn't understand what a disco ball is. I mean, there's so many things that he doesn't understand. So a lot of the humor comes out of that, and Johnny Depp is actually pitch perfect in this role. That's one of this film's greatest strengths, is Johnny Depp in top form. This is one of his best roles I've ever seen him in because he captures something with this character. This character, it's a sad story, this character, because this person was robbed of his life. He was put in a box for almost 200 years, and he wakes up. He has no idea what's going on. The family he comes back to is in ruins, and meanwhile he lost the love of his life. The witch Angelique, she killed her, and so this is a sad character along the lines of something like an Edward Scissorhands or a Sweeney Todd. You feel bad for this character, and Johnny Depp captures that very well. But he also has the humor and at times, just probably just to lighten the mood. I wasn't too crazy on a lot of the humor and why they tried to make this more of a comedy, because to me the show wasn't really a comedy. I mean, yes, it was camp, but I wasn't sure the tone that they were going for in this film was captured. It sporadically jumped back and forth a little too fast. Most Burton films, it's not as fast as this. This goes serious comedy, and it's like I wish it would have stayed with a certain tone for a little longer. Um, Maybe just not had as much humor. So that's just a general feeling on my feeling on the tone of the film. Now to get into the performances, obviously Johnny Depp does a great job. Michelle Pfeiffer, she's a little underused, but she still does a great job with her performance as the matriarch of this dysfunctional family. Johnny Lee Miller plays Roger Collins, her brother, Elizabeth Collins' brother, and he's totally wasted in this role because Roger Collins is actually one of the more fascinating characters that I recall from the show, and he's totally wasted. He doesn't really have that a lot to do. He's only given about maybe at the most 15 minutes of screen time. Ultimately, there's just so many characters. Helena Bonham Carter plays this live-in psychiatrist. She's given some stuff to do, but not too much. And then there's two kids, a 15-year-old daughter who has dreams of leaving this place, and then a very precocious young boy, David Collins, who's like 10. So there's a lot of characters in this movie, and even though the movie's almost 2 hours long, there's a lot of stuff. It feels like there was a lot of scenes that were cut out of the film and deleted scenes, and it would have been nice if they would have probably kept those in because there's a lot of character development that's randomly just missing in places, it seems like. And especially with and there's another character named Victoria Winters who we're introduced to her. It seems like she's going to be almost like the outside perspective on this weird dysfunctional family in this world at the beginning of the film, and she kind of goes away, comes back on screen for a while in the middle, goes away, then comes back at the very end. And her character is important because she is the living embodiment of Barnabas's past wife, fiance. She's like just this person that resembles her a lot, and Barnabas really connects with her. He develops emotions towards her eventually, and they needed to just enhance that development even more. So ultimately, this film could have been another 15 or 20 minutes longer, and it wouldn't have hurt because actually the film moves along at quite a nice pace. I never felt it dragging, and I never felt that there was unnecessary scenes. If anything, I wanted more scenes. I wanted more interaction with some of the family members that didn't get as much time. So this film left me wanting more at a lot of parts. But you know, to go on to some more positives, the cinematography is excellent in the film. It's just the look of the film is amazing. That's one thing that you're never going to be disappointed by when you go to a Tim Burton film. Is you're going to see some really great visuals. You're going to see just a guy who really cares about the palette that he's presenting on the screen. It always is very dark or very bright colors juxtaposed, and I feel like that works really well in this film, just because it does go back and forth between the gothic horror and the light campy humor. So it works in that respect. I'll give it that. I also really enjoyed just in general, the dialogue of the film is actually really funny, and it's actually it doesn't feel manufactured. It's a pretty decent script. I just feel like there's too much going on. They tried to put in a lot of storylines, and that's what the show had. The show had a lot of storylines going on. I get that. I just really wish that they could have expanded and just like given more room to breathe for a lot of these storylines because there are a lot going on. And they're all important because it's really about the story is about this family and how Barnabas basically tries to save this family because they're just so dysfunctional and everybody's just horrible and they're all out for themselves, and he really just comes to their rescue essentially and restores the family business and the manner in which they live in, and it's just this film left me wanting a lot more. Now, having said that, I'm trying to think of how I would rank this compared to other Tim Burton films, because that's what I really enjoy doing with a director that once they've put out a lot of different films, it's really nice to put it into their canon and try to rank it. As far as my top 3 Tim Burton films, those would be Edward Scissorhands, Big Fish, and Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Those are my top 3 Tim Burton films. So it doesn't come close to those. I would actually put this somewhere kind of towards the middle bottom. It's not as bad as like Planet of the Apes or Alice in Wonderland or uh, I really wasn't a big fan of Corpse Bride, but I would put this actually probably like maybe 10 or 11 or 12. It's a decent effort. I just was left wanting more, which I keep coming back to because it really that's the last feeling I had when I left the theater. Um, but like I said, it's a really enjoyable film. It's funny. It moves along at a really great pace, and ultimately, if you're a fan of Tim Burton and Johnny Depp, which I am, I'm a huge Tim Burton fan. I've seen every one of his films. I own most of them. So going into this, I was expecting quite a bit because I really enjoy the collaborations between this director and this actor. I feel like they need to take a break though from each other because he's been in so many movies with him now. 8 movies is a lot. And Tim Burton, some of his better films are actually without Johnny Depp. For example, Big Fish and Pee Wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice. And uh, none of those films have Johnny Depp in them. So there's no reason why he can't work without him. And I feel like Tim Burton also needs to do a more emotionally resonant film because this film, there are some emotions in it. Don't get me wrong, but it's mostly just a fun time. I didn't take it seriously. I don't think this movie's meant to be taken very seriously. It's not as camp or spoof as Mars Attacks. Mars Attacks is Tim Burton's spoof on 1950s sci-fi, bad sci-fi movies. But that's what makes that film so great is because it embraces it. It knows that it's a spoof. This film doesn't really know what it is at times. It thinks it's a gothic horror film. It thinks it's a romance. It thinks it's, like I said, a camp parody of soap operas. It thinks it's an action movie at times. So there's a lot of things going on that's kind of schizophrenic in its tone, which sometimes I don't mind because Tim Burton does that a lot in a lot of his movies. But with this film, it just felt too jarring. I didn't transition. It didn't flow naturally between those tones. I overall though I'd give this film like an 8 out of 10 if I was ranking it, just because it's enjoyable. I definitely recommend it to any Tim Burton and Johnny Depp fan just because you know what you're going to get from them. You're going to get a movie that's very well made, great production design, excellent costume design, cinematography is amazing. The performances are all actually really solid. The actor's really committed. They just weren't given a lot to work with. That's unfortunate. So hopefully next time Tim Burton can give us a little better film and really drive towards his strengths and just really really try to make an emotionally resonant film because those I feel are his best. Thanks for listening to this review and see you next time.